Welcome to Five on the Floor on the Five Reasons Sports Network and on all of our podcast feeds, including Red Circle, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, also on the Five Reasons YouTube channel, and check out our content on fivereasonsports.com. This is a post-split. This is what we do sometimes after the game. You're going to hear from Alex, Greg, and Brady. We are sponsored today, as always, by our friends over at Aggressive Insurance. That's Aggressive Insurance. Go to insurancebyLynette.com. That's insurancebyLynette.com. 2 N's, 2 T's. What can she do for you? She gets you your life insurance, she can get you renter's insurance, but also the big thing she can do is get you your car insurance. She's great at getting car insurance for people who may not have the best record. So check her out, insurancebyLynette.com. Also check out ODM Performance Solutions. That's ODM Performance Solutions. You can find them at odmpsi.com. Today you're going to hear the performance solution of the game from them. You'll probably get something better, like you'll get A-list management. You'll bring in people who will finish deals for you, rainmakers, and all of that. They can do that for you. They're a great consulting company. ODMPSI.com. My performance solution for the Miami Heat. Come out like you care. And now, today's episode.
Five on the floor, ride for my dogs. Where here's the thing, you can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars, wearing bubble frogs. Just like Butler said, you in trouble, y'all. Kept the floor playing, got it all banned. Y'all seen the block, stop with one hand. And Pat we trust, it's power, have the guts. We're here to bring the heat, y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to Five on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, and Alex Toledo, plus others from the Five Reasons Sports Network.
Welcome back to Five on the Floor. I am your host, Greg Sylvander. Tonight's floor plan with me, Alex Toledo. You can follow him on Twitter at Tropical Blanket, and Brady Hawk. Follow him at Brady Hawk 305. We are going to recap what was a pretty disappointing overall trip from Miami, and it was culminated in a loss in Sacramento, 119-113. Lots to unpack, but we're going to do this efficiently, and then we're going to do a deeper dive, I think probably tomorrow, as we get set for them to get back home. And great, they face the Golden State Warriors next, but definitely a lot of concerns throughout. I think that there's real defensive issues that they can't necessarily fix with who's on this roster. They're a combination of slow and also not really that long or big. And when you have those issues and you're switching a lot and you don't have guys that can guard up, and then you're forcing threes, and then threes are leading to long rebounds, and then long rebounds are leading into guys getting out in transition, it's just not working. So I think that they have a hole to plug, and we're starting to see it, and it's a front court hole of some kind, or at least a rebounding hole. And obviously there's some defensive stuff here. But I'm going to stop short on going that this team has an existential type issue just yet. I obviously recognize that the team does not look good. There's lots of concerns, but I'm just not doing that 6-7 games into a season. It's just not the prudent approach. And if you've watched any Miami Heat season ever, you would know that that's ridiculous to start off that way. So anyway, that's how I'm looking at this. I've talked enough to kind of get us started. Alex, I'll start with you here. 119-113. There's lots of Tyler Herro good moments. Bam Adebayo played well. Kyle Lowry rounded into form. Not much from the bench. What was your major takeaways as we try to blitz this game quickly on this show?
The major takeaway is that the Heat losing to the Sacramento Kings in Sacramento is an annual tradition at this point. They've now, I believe, lost 5 of the last 6 in Sacramento. They're known for constantly playing down to their opponent. And to be frank, they're not talented enough to be constantly playing down to their opponents as much as they have been in the last few seasons. I'm not trying to, knock their hustle or anything like that. Like, I know this team has a great work ethic, but once you start, letting Sabonis get cooking for 8 of 9, it's a problem. There's a reason they were so antsy to get him out of there as quick as they did, right? Like, I just think the way that the Kings were getting whatever look they wanted in the paint, the way that guys were getting not only, the looks in the paint, but, firing out to open threes. And the Kings just really got cooking early on. Like the Kings picked up some firepower over the summer, not anything world beating, but really they're a team built with Sabonis and Fox and then a bunch of shooting around them and kind of very iffy defense when you just look at the roster, right? So a team like the Heat, who would just, allows a lot of threes, like this is just not good if you're also letting them get whatever they want in the paint. When you're the Heat, you're supposed to be good at not letting teams get into the paint. And to top it off, like you just have to kind of play from behind the whole way. And they did a good job to come back from that big lead that just kind of felt like it might have been over sooner than later. So, I give them credit for that, but they shouldn't have been in that position in the first place. I know it's easy to say, but it's true. Like you ended up losing, if you're, from the Heat's perspective, they ended up losing in the half court in transition. The good things you can take away is that, the rebounding was almost even. They had way fewer turnovers than the Kings. They did a good job into forcing Sacramento into turnovers as the game went on. The free throws, they had an advantage there, but it's just like the defense in the first half was such a hole to come back from that they had to have just, they were playing with a tiny margin for error. And they're not good enough to be in that position, especially when you're coming into a game 2-4 at the end of a road trip. Like you have to secure that game. And it was way too easy for the Kings.
It really was. And it's interesting when you look at Sacramento, and I really want to hone in on the defense. I'm going to keep harping on this. Like if I'm running point today, this is where I want to hone in because the offensive stuff, like there's variance, and they shot 39% tonight from three. So that's typically Brady. They can win like that, but I'm going to quickly run through these stats. Sacramento shot 55% from the field. Miami got 89 shots at the goal compared to 76 for Sacramento. So way more attempts. Sacramento shot 45% from three on 31 attempts and then got 29 free throws, out rebounded the Heat. But you mentioned the 20 turnovers, Alex. Malik Monk was not the guy. We thought he was going to be the guy, Brady, that would take this team down, and it wasn't him. Instead, it was kind of a collective effort. What are you seeing from this team defensively that's not working? Because that's the calling card of this Miami Heat team. It's how they got back in the second half and obviously making runs offensively. But what are you seeing specifically on defense from this team that's not working, that's leading to these high scoring outputs and teams shooting really high percentages against them?
Yeah, the first element I feel like is a little bit basic, but it's effort. Like I think Alex was talking about some of the stuff they were doing, but it's like, you kind of have to come out in the game in Sacramento knowing the spot you're in, I guess, record-wise, and be able to recognize that and come out on the defensive end and kind of make a statement in that way, because they were sleepwalking out there in that first half defensively. Like you could always tell, and I always say this about the C team, when their rotations are clicking, you know the effort they're giving and in kind of the rhythm they're in. When the rotations look like they did in that first half, it's hard to think that they even had a chance at that point. And that's why I was surprised they even made that comeback, because I didn't think there was any saving those rotations. And we saw them improve in the second half a little bit, but it's like, you can't put yourself in that type of hole. In terms of schematically, I think the paint's in the point, totally the wrong way to say that. Points in the paint, 36 points in the paint in the first half. Like that's a problem, I guess, for one, scheme wise. I know everybody's going to point to the scheme and say the soft switching, which is part of this. Like the fact that you're giving up those type of plays when you're switching Bam out onto Fox, and you're kind of opening yourself up to offensive rebounds and putbacks. And the issue is that all probably 36 of those, when you go back and watch, were just the most easy of buckets for guys like Sabonis and others. Like that is the worst thing you want to do for a team like Sacramento. And the other part of this is, I'll say that it's not just the scheme, or specifically in the first half, their point of attack defense was totally gone. Like they were getting blown by on the perimeter. And even if Bam was by the rim, it's like, he rotates over Fox because there's nobody on him, and he just dumps it out to Sabonis. It's easy bucket. So it's not like all about Bam being switched out to the perimeter, but it's some of it. And they need to switch up some of this. I mean, just kind of tune up some of this stuff that we're seeing defensively, I guess, in the kind of point of attack region. So there's kind of a couple different elements, and I think I keep coming back to it. Consistency is a thing, because we could sit here and say they were bad, and we could sit here and say that they were good in the second half, but that can't be the case, because more often than not, you're probably going to lose the game that you're bad for a half. Like that's just the way it is. You have to be consistently good on the defensive end. And that's what's made this Heat team good over the last few years defensively, because they've been good for pretty much the entire games in terms on that end, even if the offense wasn't coming together. But I'll just throw in the fact, because I know we didn't touch on the offense. The stuff we saw in the first half specifically, I think the offense was problematic at times too, because I think they deserve a little bit of heat because the flow and everything. And I think the defensive stuff kind of leads in and bleeds into this type of stuff. But like the flow and everything and intention was just all over the place. Like obviously they picked up on it in the third and fourth quarter, but it's like, that's another thing of consistency. Like you can't have your 2 first quarters where you don't know what's happening and who's going to get the ball and where it's going to go and what the intention is. They came out in the second half and basically said, because the Kings are going to chase you off the 3, and that's basically their game plan, we're going to go to the rim a bunch in the second half. And that's what sparked their third quarter run. That's got to be key in the first half, because they put themselves in a complete hole. I really agree with you, though. The defensive stuff, I feel like, is the main element here.
No, but you bring up a good point. Like I'm honing in on the defense because I think that's more of a systemic thing that needs to be fixed for the roster. And I don't know that the right fix and the mix of players is necessarily all here. But you're right. Like the offensive stuff, to give up 71 points in the first half, but then also not show up offensively, and it take you a half for them to start to look like they're clicking and figuring some stuff out. You're right. They were not aggressive enough. But you know who is aggressive enough? Aggressive Insurance. They are an insurance broker agency that's been servicing South Florida for over 15 years. They offer auto insurance, homeowners insurance, condo insurance, life, retirement programs, free notary service. It's a one-stop shop. They represent leading insurance carriers throughout South Florida. If you have a bad driving record, this is where you want to go. Aggressive Insurance. There's no driver refused, free phone quotes, so you get some info right off the bat. You want to reach out to Lynette. She's a friend of the program, and this is the website. Super important. Insurance by Lynette, LINNETTE.com. So that's Lynette, not with a Y, but with an I. She also has an Instagram account, aggressive_insurance, Facebook, aggressive insurance, and Twitter @aggressive insurance. Definitely check out insurancebylynette.com. And friend of the program, thank you for always tuning in. So let's talk offense for a little bit before we wrap. Tyler Herro in the first half looked weird. To start the game, I was like, oh no, like, is he about to have another one of these clunkers? And then he started to figure stuff out, to the point that he was kind of like toying with De'Aaron Fox had a nice block, and De'Aaron Fox had a good game too, but he wasn't stopping Tyler. Talk about anything positive, Alex, from an offensive perspective that you're taking from this game. I know that obviously Jimmy had kind of an off night after doing a lot of heavy lifting in some of the previous games. The bench was non-existent. But I guess Tyler Herro, let's talk about Tyler Herro, 13 of 22. What did you like most about what you saw from Tyler tonight?
Well, look, it's just the fact that he can kind of fight back, because he got better as the game went on, right? And I think that was the key thing for me, is that he was coming off a couple of tough games for him, and I think the expectation for him was always to get better, right? Is always to stand out, especially coming into the starting role. And I think it was starting, to pick up a little bit. And now it's like, the end of the road trip, you want to get this win against Sacramento, and they're the Sacramento Kings. They haven't made the playoffs since 2006. For a reason. Like, they're, again, coming into this game, they hadn't won a game, were easily one of the worst defenses in the league, which, anybody could have seen coming. And just like Tyler getting it going here is good to see, just to see him kind of fight through the adversity, you know what I mean? And just go crazy, because he ended up going 13 of 22. And I think that's exactly the type of performance they needed when you only get 4 of 11 from Jimmy, right? And I think definitely the worst game we've seen from Jimmy so far in this regular season, which is not to trash him. He's been awesome, even though he still, did a bunch of great stuff in this game. Like, I thought he was awesome defensively, and especially in the second half was one of the biggest reasons that he were able to come back there, just with his presence and along with others. But the other positive was Bam going 9 of 16, getting to the free throw line 6 times isn't crazy. You get, 8 free throw attempts from Lowry, just some things here and there, since you asked for positives, right? But no, Tyler was easily the biggest takeaway there. Like, he just gets to his spots with ease at this point. And he was taking all the shots that were there, was making tough ones. I mean, had to dunk through traffic. Like, what more could you ask from him? I think if they just would have had a little bit more from Jimmy, maybe one or two more threes fall down, and that's it. Like they win this game. And that whole lead that the Kings had just goes up in history. It really came down to, a couple of shots towards the end, but Tyler almost offensively willed them to the win. Again, other guys contributed for sure in that second half, especially with the team defensive effort that was completely opposite of the first half. But it was just great to see Tyler had this game after the games he's had so far.
Agreed. And we're not going to poke out a bunch of positives because I know that the listeners are already thinking Greg's about to come on here and try to enable what's happening and be apologetic for what's happening. That's not where I'm going with this. There are issues because the margin of error is too slim for this team offensively. Like, they essentially need Jimmy, Bam, and Tyler to get cooking every single night for this to work, or they need to shoot lights out. And so, Brady, as they go back home, and we're going to dive into this more tomorrow, but just like quickly, with the margin of error this slim and with them needing, and really Kyle too, if you really look at it, they need those four guys to basically get 13 or more points for them to really cobble together any coherent type of offense. And that's just a super basic way of breaking it down. How are they going to operate between now and when they can potentially even make any type of moves? And we're going to close the show with a little bit of that here in a minute. How can they offset that and essentially figure out ways to transcend this such a small margin for error offensively? As at least that's what it seems like so far to date this season.
Yeah, I'll say step one is you're kind of in an awkward position when you're so early into the season and a heavy portion of your minutes are survival mode. Like, we went through that portion when it was get through the Dwayne Dedmon section. And then it was okay, maybe don't let Jovic get picked on too much over this specific minutes. And then it's okay, maybe Udonis Haslem has to look serviceable for this many minutes. It's just you're going over and over and just trying to survive over pockets of time where it's just not a good formula, I guess, for especially when we're this early into the season. That's usually something that comes into that December, January range. So ways that they could kind of survive over this time period, I think a portion of it is you saying the shooting has to be elite. They have to be able to shoot the three ball at a high level, which they shot it decent in this game, but it was just more so heavily in one half over the other. But the big thing, and I don't want to just harp on the same thing, but we kept saying before, I think it's the most important thing. They'll be in games if they defend at a high level. That could even bypass the rebounding deficit slightly. The rebounding deficit is big. We've been talking about how big time that is, and the fact that they're just kind of getting easy buckets in the paint, putbacks, second chance points. But if you're closing out on rebounds, on closeouts and rotating and all of those things, it can kind of, I guess, diminish the differences, I guess, between when you're out of this, when you don't have these guys to rebound, when you don't have these guys to defend in the point of attack, like an Oladipo. And I'm not saying Oladipo shifts things, but I'm just saying these are the things that they're missing right now that they are kind of lacking at the moment. The two guys that are on the injury report, which once again, let me repeat, that is not going to change, I don't think, these outcomes of these games too much. But the two issues I'm talking about are point of attack defense and rebounding. And they have two guys on the injury report that they could at least use to try and push this thing forward. So right now it's just try to get to a point where you're not in survival mode. So it'll be interesting. And it's also interesting to me how these minutes are being distributed in very odd, weird ways. I pointed out in the last one after the Warriors game, and it's so they went 10 deep tonight. Haslam got 8 minutes. Jovic got 1 minute. And Duncan Robinson got 5 minutes. They're going so heavily into the 7 guys, and they're just trying to try stuff along the way because they know what they have, and they're just trying to push things in a certain direction. But I think they know at this point, when you look at this roster and just trying to get these certain guys help, they just need that little extra thing to put them over the hump. And the last thing I'll say is, are we ever going to see Jimmy, Bam, and Tyler play well on the same night? I feel we're getting to the point where every time where we at least see 2 of them, it's we come on here and we're well, this one guy didn't push through. And I think it's been all 3 of them at some point. If them 3 could all click at the same time, then maybe we're having a little bit of a different discussion and at least can get them a couple extra wins along the way.
It's true. If the depth isn't there, they have to figure that out. All of them. Kyle has to step up, and they have to be able to play together because they're playing such a significant amount of the minutes, so you're spot on there. I'm really interested. They come home and they're going to get Sacramento again, I think, but then we got Golden State first. And Golden State, if I believe I saw before we started recording, they were losing, they are down 101-98 right now as we're recording in Charlotte. Oh gosh, if they're coming off of a loss coming into Miami, that's going to be a tough one. But you know what won't be tough? It's taking Steph Curry's over on Prize Picks for that game. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. You literally choose your favorite players, choose a statistic. They posted, let's say it's 25 points for Tyler Herro against Sacramento. You choose over or under. If you would have gone over, you hit that one. You stack a bunch of those correct picks together, and you could win up to 10 times your money. It's available in 30 states, DC, Canada. Get in the game today, but use the code 5 FIVE to have your initial deposit matched up to $100. That's FIVE at prizepicks.com. Download the app or use it on your desktop. All right. So here's how we're going to end it from each of you. Scale of 1 to 10, 10 being most concerned. How concerned are you about this team? And question 2. Is the solution to this team being a contender currently on the roster? Alex.
Well, for the first question, I think, just my first reaction, I think I'm going to say, let's say 4.5 for level of concern. I think it's starting to grow a little bit, but it's less of like an overall concern. I'm not sure how to describe how I feel right now, just because I think a lot of the losses so far, it's been like lack of execution and not great shooting. I don't think the shooting's been awful. It hasn't been great either. That's one thing that they've been really good at in the past few regular seasons. So I do think, not that it was terrible tonight, but like Brady said earlier, it took a while to pick up, and, just playing from that deficit, like between tonight, the Chicago loss, you had the tough Warriors loss. Like, I don't know. It doesn't feel like they were outmatched in a lot of these games. You know what I mean? That I felt it feels like they're in all of these games for the most part, right? And so that's why I don't feel that concerned about it, but it is more of a concern of like, what is this team in general? And I'm still more worried about potential playoff matchups after having seen some of them. Like, they can compete, but teams will find the holes and go at them every time. And so you can compete and have great schemes and do a good job throughout the game, but then like things will break down. And we saw that against the Warriors, for example. Again, the Warriors just won the title. That's not the best example because it's not a night-to-night team for the Heat, but just in general, like, there are holes and teams are picking at them. And I think they're a little bit easier to pick at because they don't have some of the size and bulk they had last season. And it's not all of it, but I didn't mean to ramble here, man. It's just hard to describe how I feel with the Heat right now. It's very up and down. And so what was the second question?
Do you think that the solutions are on the roster today, or do you think that it's inevitable that they're going to have to do something different from a roster construction perspective?
If you're talking about an individual solution, no. I think like they have what they have. You can play certain guys more, and that will help. If you think so, that's fine. Like, if you want to play Jovic more, I understand. I'm with it. That's cool. But if you're talking about just trying to help solve some of those matchup issues, no, that's not on the roster right now.
Brady, so they're 2 and what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What are they? 2 and 6? 2 and 5?
2 and 5, I want to say.
2 and 5 sounds good.
Yeah,
it's better than 2 and 6. But we may be getting there. How concerned are you? And is the solution to this on the roster?
Yeah, I'm pretty much with Alex. I'll say I think I'm a little higher on the scale. I'll say around a 6, just because of the reason that he mentioned, like the fact that I said before the season that they're going to need a move at some point. I just thought they could buy enough time before the deadline to like be able to do enough with this roster to be able to win regular season games. But my take was that if you go into the playoffs with this, like if you match up with a Milwaukee, with a Boston, that is just so much bigger. They're just going to be able to pick you apart. But now it's getting to the point where that's the reason the number on my scale is getting a little higher, because I think they need it for the regular season too. Like when you're looking at the deficit, you're seeing game in and game out with the rebounding stuff, with the defensive stuff, with the fact that Bam's getting in foul trouble really early in these games, partly because he's being more aggressive. Like that's another discussion, but he's being more aggressive. He's getting offensive fouls. You can't have both. You can't have him be aggressive and then want the foul trouble to come back. And then all of a sudden now Haslam and Jovic and all these other guys are just sharing time to kind of buy enough time, like I said before. So, and I'll say I definitely don't think the answer's on the roster, because I really believe they need some front court help. They really do. Like, they just don't have enough options right now. Like they're leaning way too heavily on their main guys. And I don't think they thought they were going to do that this early in the season. Like they've always been about depth. Your last season, especially, like all they preached was depth. And the fact that we were talking after games about which guy that was going to be out of the 10-man rotation because they had so many options. Now it's like they're shrinking to 7 when games really matter. Like second halves, like this early in the season, it's getting a little strange that I think that alone, and yes, they'll say because they have some guys out, but like that shows what Spo and his coaching staff thinks of their roster. Like the fact that this early in the season, they're shrinking to 7, it tells you that they need some help around the edges or specifically in the front court. So I think that number is going to keep rising as much as they keep getting kind of destroyed defensively and short on the boards. But I'm still not in the panic mode. I still think they can win regular season games if they get their defensive stuff together. But ultimately, you're going to get to a point where you're going to need that move. And if you're going to inevitably get to it, and there's that guy that you see out there, get him sooner because you can use him now.
My concern level, it matches Kyle Lowry's uniform number. That's a 7. I don't know about all this, y'all. But I also think that it can be fixed. So while the concern is high today, this is just a moment in time. And at another moment in time, the concern level can go down. You're absolutely right. The solution is not on the roster. And the issue is that, well, there's 2 things. One, how quickly can you find reinforcements or patch this up long enough to then be able to get reinforcements? Because you can't be like 11 games below 500 and then go to make the solution like that. That's not going to work. So you have to start thinking in those terms, but you have restrictions related to that on who can be traded, etc. So how do you buy enough time to get to that point? And here's number 2. Like if they're really deficient in certain areas and they just skate off the luxury tax, like that just shows that there's a fundamental belief that they don't think necessarily that getting anyone out there is going to really move the needle enough to push them over the edge and make that big of a difference. And to me, then that's an indication that we need to look deeper at this roster from a construction perspective. So, but I think that they can make a trade. I really think that there is a Jay Crowder, Andre Iguodala type move that can absolutely shape shift this roster. But they're going to need to start looking. I'm with y'all there. And haha, listeners, my concern level was higher than both Alex and Brady. Good night.
Thank you for listening to the 5 on the Floor on the 5 Regional Sports Network.